Hello guys, today I'm really happy because today is my favorite festival. It is the festival of Diwali. So guys, wish you all a very happy Diwali. I wish that this festival of light will bring lots of prosperity, love and happiness in your life. So guys, do enjoy. I'm away from India, but I'm enjoying my festival with my family here, with my wife and I'm going to show you a game where some fireworks happen in Magnus Carlsen's game. So guys, let's enjoy the game of Magnus Carlsen on the day of Diwali. So in the European Team Chess Championship, in the first round, Magnus Carlsen was paired against Jergus, and it was an interesting game. So guys, stay tuned till the end and do like this video, share this video with your friend, and if you are new here, subscribe to my channel. So let's begin. The game starts with e4 and black plays in this position e5. Magnus goes for knight f3, knight to c6, and now he plays bishop b5. Maybe Roy Lopez opening, knight f6, and now here in this position, Magnus plays d4. Well, we all know this thing that there is a very famous opening in this position, that is the Berlin defense can be there, that you can go for maybe castle and then knight captures e4 will happen, then you play d4 and black can play knight d6, bishop captures c6, d captures c6, and after the capture of e5, knight f5, and we reach to the Berlin endgame, and which has been a favorite endgame, you can say, the opening of Magnus Carlsen. He has played this opening from both the sides, and there are many interesting games of Magnus Carlsen. But today he was not in mood to play the Berlin defense, you can say. That's why in this position he decided to play d4. Well, he is going straight to the center, you can say, and now here opponent captures on d4, which is kind of understandable. Another move which was possible in the position was e captures d4. Then white might play e5, knight to e4, and then castles and so on. Okay, it is an interesting opening, I'll say. Mainly in this position, just to let you know, bishop e7 is played, and then white captures on d4, then castling, and then you can put the knight on f5 with an very interesting position. Well, black can always play d5, attack the knight here, and the main point is you capture here, knight captures on e7, and then c6 will come, bishop needs to go back, and it's an interesting position. But okay, in the position, instead of capturing with ed4, he decided to capture with knight captures d4. Now this knight is attacking here, so Magnus goes for knight captures d4, and here instead of capturing the knight, which was a possibility in the position, then again e5 will be played, and then you have to play something like knight d5, or maybe the move c6 is also possible in the position. But instead of capturing d4, black decided to play c6, attacking the bishop. So Magnus saves the bishop with bishop to c4, attacking the pawn on f7. Here e captures d4, queen captures d4 happen on the board, and now black offers the queen exchange with queen b6. Of course, Magnus can go for the queen exchange, and black will be kind of happy because his rook's file will be opened up, and he will definitely get some play in the center of the board also. Maybe after bishop to c5, castling will happen, and so on. Like, this will be an equal position, I will say. And Magnus decided not to capture the queens in the position. He decided to give a check because opponent's king is in the center of the board and he wants to attack on his king. So bishop e7 is the only move. Otherwise, you just lose the right to castle. Magnus goes for castle in the position. d6 happened. Queen is under attack. Queen goes to g3 square, attacking the pawn on g7. And now black castles in the position. Well, you can see there is always a threat of bishop h6, and some pressure will be there on the g7 pawn. The king needs to be careful. But right now, if you go for bishop to h6, it's not that good because black has a very good move, that is knight to h5. And after this, queen cannot really maintain on the g file because all the squares are blocked. Maybe you can play queen to f3 trying to attack here. That is one of the moves which I can see, because if black captures the bishop on h6, then queen into h5 and white will be on top. But instead of this, another option is there that just save the knight, and then you have to play your bishop somewhere, and then black is having quite interesting position. But another thing is that after queen to c5, the bishop on c4 is under attack. That's also true. So if you save your bishop with bishop e2, further attacking the knight on h5. Now if you capture here, queen captures h5. After the queen exchanges, I think it should be equal. But black has an interesting option in the position, that is queen captures c2. And after queen captures c2, the pawn on e4 is under attack, the pawn on b2 is under attack, and maybe white will be happy to just sacrifice the pawn and go for the king over here. It is, according to me, practically speaking, it is a double-edged position. Means white cannot really just checkmate black's king, and black is out of danger, and black is pawn up. So you can say double-edged. Still a lot of plays there. Knight c3 will come in the game, and for the sacrificed pawn, white definitely has some compensation against the king. But Magnus understand this thing, that black is getting a lot of play in that position, and it's not that cool position to play. So he plays a simple move in the position, knight c3, just developing a piece, not going for the cheap tactics in the position. And now here black plays bishop e6. Well, after bishop to e6, he captures here, and now you can see that black is trying to have a very solid structure in the center of the board. Means his pawns are there. Maybe he is willing to play pawn to e5, and then rook f7, rook will come to f8, and so on. Okay, but Magnus Carlsen looks at the position and he says like, okay, I cannot really allow the things which black wants to do in the position, but I can play something myself. So he goes for e5 himself in the position. The point is, if you capture here, then queen will capture on e5. The pawn on e6 is a permanent weakness in the position, and although black will defend that position also, I am not saying like black will be in a bad position, but still I will prefer to play this position any day with white pieces, because I have a clear target on e6. My pieces are open in the position, and I can play freely, right? So his opponent also understand this thing, that he cannot just give everything to his opponent, and especially when Magnus Carlsen gets this kind of position, definitely he will be having lots of winning chances. And if you play knight d5 trying to be cool, but the problem is that you are going to lose the pawn on d6, and that's also not a great idea. So here he plays a kind of dubious move, I will say. Knight e8 was played in the game, and Magnus goes for queen g4, attacking the e6 pawn. He saves the pawn with rook to f5, and now he captures on d6, bishop captures d6, and he plays queen c4, still going for the pawn on e6. And after this exchange, I will say the pawn on e6 is a permanent weakness in black's camp, and he needs to defend that position all the time. Okay, so now after knight c7, he defends the pawn on e6. Now he brings the knight in the center of the board. Always remember, whenever the knight comes in the center of the board, it is a very great thing for you, because it becomes the octopus knight. To my all students who are young, I will say, I always tell them that try to put the knight in the center of the board, because it will control 8 squares in the position. See, all these squares will be controlled by the knight, and we can call it the octopus knight. Okay, well, here he plays bishop e5 because the bishop was under attack. Magnus Carlsen says this thing, and he said like, okay, the queen on b6 is a little bit awkwardly placed in the position, right? So he goes for the queen with a4 move. The point is, well, the pawn on b2 is not at all hanging, because if you capture the pawn, then rook b1 and the bishop falls. So that's not a problem. He plays knight d5, and after knight d5, well, the bishop is trying to put on, like black is trying to put the bishop on d4, put the pressure on f2, followed by rook f8, and we need to be very careful. So Magnus Carlsen understand this thing. He said like, I don't want to give that kind of counterplay to my opponent. I'll just simply play c3, not allowing bishop to d4 kind of move. And his pawn structure is also safe. The pawn on b2 is no longer attacked by the bishop. Well, the queen is still attacking, but if we get the chance, then we can always play a5. So Magnus understand this thing. Here opponents Jergus decides to play a5, not allowing a5 move, because if Magnus was able to play a5, then I will say like black will be in big trouble in the position. So instead of giving a lot of positional advantage to the opponent, he plays a5 in the position, and now Magnus further restricts his opponent's activity. He plays g3 move. I really like the way he is restricting his opponent's play, because by playing c3 he restricted this bishop. By playing g3, he's also restricting this knight. The knight cannot really jump around here in the position, and whenever it's needed, you can also play f4 if it's needed. Right now it is not possible, I know, because the queen is pinning the pawn, but in future if you play king g2 or something, he will be freeing himself, you can say. And the move g3 also blocks the bishop's diagonal on this side. So white is defending. Okay, the knight on e4 is playing a big role in the position, because the f2 pawn is a weakness. So white's pieces are playing in a very good role in the position. You can see like only the queen and the knight, these two pieces are developed in the position. Still the rook on f1, bishop on c1 and rook on a1 are not played in the game. Black has more activity in the position. So when your opponent is leading in development, I will say like you need to defend. Okay, first try to defend in the position. If the attack fends off, then you can do your own activity. Okay, so here, and as you can see in the position, I had talked about this earlier also, black has the permanent weakness on e6. So if Magnus manages to reduce opponent's attacking pieces, then he will be able to attack on the weakness in his opponent's camp. But he needs to be patient in the position. He cannot just go for the attack and try to get something because he is not ready. This is the quality of Magnus Carlsen I really like, that he understands chess so much that he goes step by step. He doesn't hurry in chess, and that's the quality we should always try to inculcate in us also. Okay, so black plays h6, stopping all kinds of ideas, bishop g5, knight g5, attacking the pawn on e6. Magnus says in this position, let me just connect the rooks, let me get the bishop also in the game. Very nice play, I will say. Black plays rook e8, supporting the pawn on e6. Okay, so Magnus gets his rook in the game. So rook on f1 is already doing a good job of supporting the pawn on f2. Knight is also doing good job in the center of the board. Okay, he's also getting all these squares, you can say. Bishop d2 is silently putting some pressure on pawn on h6, and here in this position black needs to play accurately because the pawn on e6 is always a weakness. He plays a passive move which I was not really thinking in the position. He plays bishop to b8. I really don't understand why he played bishop to b8, because bishop was doing good job for controlling all the squares. Maybe he wanted to put queen c7 and put here, but still that is also not really working. So only God knows why he played that move. So here white plays rook e2, indirectly supporting the pawn on b2, you can say, because like if you capture here, bishop into h6 is always the threat. But his opponent says like, okay, let it happen, I am going to capture the pawn on b2. Magnus immediately captures the pawn on h6, and now the pawns are like the broken teeth on the side of king. Here the pawn on g7 is the only defender for the black's king, means in the pawn, in the terms of pawns, I will say. So now queen is under attack. First of all, he plays queen to a3, being ready, you can say, like to come back in the position and defend any kind of attack which will happen on the black's king. He goes for bishop to e3, saves the bishop. Knight captures on e3, and now after this capture, I think like this was a little bit tempting decision by his opponent. Maybe queen f8 was much better in the position, still putting some pressure and also defending everything on the king side, because the knight on d5 is a very well placed piece from black side, I'll say. Bishop on b8 is also okay, but it is not really doing that great. But the knight on d5 is supporting everything, is defending against this threat also here. So I think like he shouldn't have exchanged the knight on d5, but okay, he defends the knight on like exchanges the knight on d5 with knight captures e3, rook captures e3. Now white has a clear plan of action to attack the pawn on e6. Okay, so now finally he plays queen e7. Now white has the idea of attacking the pawn on e6, but how will you do it? You need to find out the way to do that thing. In order to do that thing, you need to utilize your knight, and the knight can jump to c5 or g5 in future to attack the pawn on e6. But we need to get control of the c5 or g5, means we need to have some support, because right now black is controlling the c5 as well as g5 square, you can say. But we cannot really do anything about the c5 square, but we can definitely do something about the g5 square. And Magnus plays h4 in order to get the control of the g5 square, and the knight g5 is the move which will be coming very soon on the board. Here black plays queen to d7. Maybe in future he wants to play queen d5 and try to exchange the queens. Magnus goes for knight g5, attacking the pawn on e6. And if in this position if you try to play queen to d5, of course Magnus will not capture the queen, because if he capture the queen, then black will be kind of happy, because let's see, if you capture the e6 pawn in the position after rook e6, knight e6, the point is black will be getting some counterplay with b5, and he will be having, because black has one pawn, like extra pawn on the queen side, and although white has two extra pawns on the king side, but they are still in their initial stage only, they are not advanced. And as the kings are there, white will not be advancing the pawns too fast. Okay, and black will definitely get some counterplay with b5 move. So Magnus is patient, like he will definitely not capture the queens. I think the move which he will play is queen e2, further putting the pressure here and also getting ready for rook e1, and I think the pawn on e6 is going to fall for sure. And if by mistake, if you play e5 at any point in the position, then the knight will always have this square, the queen will be like the bishop will not be able to do anything on the side of the board. And another interesting move which I think is rook d1, because by playing rook to d1 in the position, the queen is actually not having that many squares in the position. And if you play queen to c5 or queen to b3, which looks like a only move, then queen h5 is a very interesting idea. The point is we are attacking the rook on e8, plus queen h7 is also one of the threats in the position, followed by capturing the rook on f5. So black cannot really defend against everything. If he tries to defend with rook f8, then it's a checkmate, so you cannot do that thing. If you move the rook anywhere else, then we can, as I said, like we'll just give a check and pick up the rook on f5. So black is in big trouble. So even if like queen c5, same thing can happen, queen to h5. The best way might be, okay, there is no best way for black to defend in the position, maybe rook into g5 I was thinking, but we can first capture the rook and then we capture this rook on g5. So black is in big trouble, he cannot just play e5 move. So in the position he plays like queen d5 is not played. In the position after knight to g5, he plays bishop e7, further attacking here, you can say, on this diagonal. And after this he plays rook d3, attacking the queen on d7 square. Rook comes to d5 square, and now of course he doesn't want to exchange the rooks, he plays rook to f3. The idea is to play rook to f7 very soon. If you play rook f5, it is a big mistake because there is a pin on this diagonal and white will miss. Magnus will just capture the rook on f5 free of cost. So rook f8 was played in the game, and now after rook captures f8, king captures f8, he plays queen e4. The idea is to come here, and also the pawn on e6 is under attack. So black plays king e7, like saving the pawn on e6. He plays queen g6, attacking the pawn on g7, and after king d8, the not only the pawn on g7 but also the pawn on e6 is still under attack. And in order to save this pawn, he plays king to d8, but that's game over. Knight into e6 check, king to c8 is the only move, and after knight into g7, white is clearly 2 pawns up in the position and these pawns are going to roll. He plays the last move in the game, he plays rook to e5, and after queen f6, black decided to resign the game in this position. Well, it is not like directly lost position, but slowly and gradually Magnus will definitely push the pawns forward, and I think like he is definitely going to win the game very soon. So that's the reason his opponent resigned. I hope that you enjoyed the full game analysis which we did. The pawn on e6 was the weakness which Magnus exploited, and which was very interesting. I will say, like he kept the piece on the board, he maneuvered the pieces, and the way he played is really instructive. So I hope that you enjoyed the game of Magnus Carlsen, and guys, wish you all a very happy Diwali once again. Do comment me in the section how did you like this video, and we'll be meeting very soon in the next video. Till that moment, take care, bye bye, love you all.